Sign here, Brielle. This is just a formality. Mom's new husband, Keith Brennan, slid the thick stack of papers across the conference table toward me. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, and supposedly inheriting my grandmother's hotel empire worth $50 million. But something felt wrong. The lawyers sitting on Keith's side of the table wore matching smug expressions. My grandmother's longtime attorney, Mr. Hernandez, wasn't even in the room. Keith had insisted we use his legal team instead. What exactly am I signing? I asked, pulling the documents closer. Keith's smile tightened. Standard trust transfer documents. Your grandmother wanted to ensure proper management until you're more experienced. I'll oversee operations temporarily while you learn the business. Temporarily. That word echoed in my mind. My grandmother, Florence Montgomery, had built Montgomery hotels from a single bed and breakfast into a chain of 12 boutique properties across the Pacific Northwest. She died 3 weeks ago, and I was still processing the loss. My name is Brielle Montgomery, and I'm the only grandchild of Florence Montgomery, hotel magnate and the strongest woman I'd ever known. She raised me after my father died when I was 8. My mother, Diane, had always been more interested in social status than parenting. When I was 15, Grandma basically became my parent, teaching me everything about the hotel business. I'd worked every position from housekeeping to front desk during summers and school breaks. Grandma had promised the business would be mine. Now, sitting in this cold conference room in downtown Seattle, I felt her absence like a physical weight. Keith had married my mother just 6 months ago. He was 45, handsome in a calculated way, with silver hair and expensive suits. Mom was 52 and had been thrilled to find someone after years of being single. I'd never trusted him. Something about the way he'd immediately started asking questions about Grandma's business felt predatory. "Can I review these documents with my own attorney first?" I asked, not touching the papers. Keith's jaw tightened. "That's unnecessary expense, Brielle. These are standard documents that Mr. Hernandez helped prepare before your grandmother passed." That felt like a lie, but I didn't know enough about legal matters to be certain. Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Honey, Keith is family now. He only wants to help. You know how complicated business management can be. You're so young." Young, I hated that word. Grandma never treated me like I was too young. She'd been training me to run Montgomery hotels since I was 16. "I'd still prefer to have someone review them," I said firmly. Keith stood abruptly. "Fine, take the documents, but the board meeting is scheduled for Friday. If you haven't signed by then, the trust provisions trigger an alternative management structure. You could lose control entirely." His tone had shifted from friendly to threatening in seconds. Mom looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. I took the documents and left, my hands shaking with anger and anxiety. Instead of going home to my apartment, I drove to Montgomery Hotel's flagship property, the Florence, a beautiful historic building in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. Grandma had renovated it 10 years ago, preserving its 1920s charm while adding modern luxury. The front desk manager, Carmen Rodriguez, had worked for Grandma for 15 years. She looked up as I entered, and her expression immediately shifted to concern. "Brielle, honey, are you okay?" I must have looked as shaken as I felt. "Is the executive office available? I need somewhere quiet to think." "Of course. Do you want coffee, tea?" "Coffee would be amazing." Carmen squeezed my shoulder as she handed me the office keys. The executive office still smelled like Grandma's perfume, a subtle floral scent that made my eyes sting with fresh grief. I sat at her massive oak desk and began reading the documents Keith had given me. The more I read, the more alarmed I became. The documents weren't simple trust transfers. They gave Keith complete operational control of Montgomery hotels for an indefinite period. I would technically own the properties, but Keith would make all decisions about management, finances, sales, renovations, and even hearing. There was a clause about protecting the estate's value during the heir's maturation period. Another section outlined Keith's compensation, a salary of $300,000 annually plus 20% of all profits. I felt sick. This wasn't temporary management. This was Keith inserting himself as permanent CEO while I became a figurehead owner. My phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something made me answer. "Miss Montgomery, this is Arthur Hernandez. I've been trying to reach you. We need to talk about your grandmother's will immediately." My heart started pounding. Mr. Hernandez, Keith said you helped prepare these trust documents. I did no such thing. I haven't spoken to Keith Brennan about your grandmother's estate. Whatever he's told you is a lie. I agreed to meet Mr. Hernandez at his office within the hour. He was 70, with kind eyes and a reputation for absolute integrity. Grandma had trusted him completely. Your grandmother's actual will is very clear, he said, opening a file on his desk. She left the entire Montgomery Hotels Corporation to you, Brielle. No trusts, no management provisions, no delays. You inherit everything outright on your 22nd birthday, which was last month. But Keith said there were complications because I'm inexperienced. Mr. Hernandez's expression hardened. Keith Brennan has no legal authority over your grandmother's estate. None. The only people involved in the will execution are you, me, and the probate court. How did he even get access to legal documents? He said they were standard trust transfers. He had lawyers with him in the meeting. Not my lawyers. Brielle, I think someone is trying to defraud you. These documents you brought, they're designed to look official, but they have no legal standing. If you'd signed them, you'd essentially be signing away your inheritance voluntarily. My hands started shaking. Can they do that? Just create fake legal documents? It's fraud and it's criminal, but if you'd signed without reviewing them with proper counsel, it would have been very difficult to undo. You would have been voluntarily entering into a contract, even if that contract was based on deception. Mr. Hernandez leaned forward. Your grandmother anticipated something like this might happen. She didn't trust Keith from the moment your mother started dating him. She hired a private investigator. He pulled out another folder, this one much thicker. Keith Brennan isn't who he claims to be. His real name is Keith Brennan, but he's been married 3 times before your mother. Each time, he married wealthy widows or divorcees. Each time, he gained control of their assets through various schemes. 2 of his previous wives lost significant portions of their estates before they realized what was happening. I felt cold all over. Does my mother know? I don't believe so. Your grandmother planned to tell her, but she passed away before she could arrange the conversation. The private investigator's report was detailed and damning. Keith had a pattern. He'd romance wealthy women, marry them quickly, then systematically work to gain control of their assets. He'd been investigated twice for elder fraud but never charged due to lack of evidence. His first wife had died under suspicious circumstances, though the death was ruled natural. His second and third wives had both lost substantial money before divorcing him. Your grandmother changed her will 4 months ago, Mr. Hernandez continued. Originally, she'd planned to leave everything to you with your mother as trustee until you turned 25. After meeting Keith, she removed your mother from any role in the estate. She wanted you to have full control immediately. Why didn't she tell me about Keith? She planned to, but she wanted solid evidence first. The investigator's final report came in 2 days before she passed away. I believe she was preparing to show it to your mother when she had her heart attack. Grandma's death had been sudden. She'd been healthy, active, vibrant at 78. Then one morning, she'd collapsed in her office at the Florence. Mr. Hernandez, do you think Keith had something to do with Grandma's death? The question sounded paranoid even as I asked it, but the lawyer's expression told me I wasn't the first to wonder. The death was ruled natural causes, a massive heart attack, but your grandmother's doctor told me privately that it was unexpected. She had no history of heart disease, maintained excellent health, had regular checkups. He was surprised. He paused. I'm not saying Keith murdered your grandmother, Brielle. I'm saying there are questions that were never properly investigated because the death appeared natural on the surface. My mind was reeling. What do I do now? First, you don't sign anything Keith gives you. Second, we proceed with the proper probate process. I'll file the will with the court this week. You'll officially inherit the hotels within 30 days. Third, you need to be very careful around Keith. If he realizes you know the truth, he might become dangerous. Should I tell my mother? Mr. Hernandez hesitated. That's your choice, but understand that she's legally married to him. Anything you tell her, he might learn. I left Mr. Hernandez's office feeling like the ground had shifted under my feet. Everything I thought I knew had changed in 2 hours. My grandmother's death might not have been natural. My mother's husband was a con artist. My inheritance was being stolen through elaborate fraud, and I was somehow supposed to navigate this alone. I drove back to the Florence and found Carmen still at the front desk. Can we talk privately? I asked. She immediately called another staff member to cover the desk and led me to a small office behind the lobby. "What's wrong?" I told her everything. The fake legal documents, Mr. Hernandez's revelations, Keith's history, the questions about Grandma's death. Carmen listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. "Your grandmother knew something was wrong. The week before she died, she asked me to make copies of all the hotel's financial records. She said she wanted them stored somewhere Keith couldn't access them." "Did she say why?" "She said Keith had been asking too many questions about the business. She was worried he was planning something." "Where are the copies?" I asked urgently. Carmen pulled out her phone and opened a cloud storage app. "Everything's here. 5 years of financial records, property deeds, contracts, employee files, everything. Your grandmother gave me the login information and told me to share it with you if anything happened to her." She handed me a piece of paper with a username and password. She also told me something else. She said if Keith ever tried to take control of the hotels, I should remind you about the contingency plan. "What contingency plan?" "She didn't tell me details. She just said you'd know what it meant when the time came." I had no idea what Grandma meant by a contingency plan, but the fact that she'd anticipated Keith's moves gave me hope. She'd been preparing for this. That night, I went through the financial records Carmen had shared. What I found was shocking. Over the past 6 months, since Keith married my mother, money had been disappearing from Montgomery Hotel's accounts. Small amounts, carefully hidden in operational expenses, but totaling nearly $200,000. The withdrawals were authorized by someone with administrative access to the accounts. That access should have been limited to Grandma and the company's chief financial officer, Harold Chen. I called Harold immediately despite the late hour. "Brielle," he answered on the second ring. "Do you know anything about unusual withdrawals from the company accounts over the past 6 months?" Silence. Then, "I've been waiting for you to notice. Your grandmother noticed them 3 months ago. She was investigating when she died. Who authorized the withdrawals? I don't know. The digital signatures appeared legitimate, but Florence told me she hadn't approved them. We were planning to bring in forensic accountants when she passed away. After that, Keith told me to stop the investigation. He said it was causing unnecessary stress for the family during the grieving period." "Keith had no authority to tell you that." "I know, but he was very persuasive and your mother backed him up. She said she was acting as temporary executor of the estate." Another lie. Mom had no legal role in Grandma's estate. "Harold, I need you to freeze all company accounts immediately. No one makes any withdrawals without my direct approval." "I'll do it first thing tomorrow morning," Harold promised. "Brielle, there's something else you should know. Keith has been meeting with hotel property developers. I think he's planning to sell some of the properties." My blood ran cold. "He can't sell anything. He doesn't own them. He's been telling people he has power of attorney over the estate. One developer contacted me directly to verify, and I told him no such authority existed. But if Keith has convinced your mother to sign documents..." Harold trailed off. I understood what he wasn't saying. If Keith had manipulated Mom into giving him legal authority over her interests, and if he could convince people I was incapable of managing the business, he might be able to force sales. The next morning, I met with Mr. Hernandez again. "We need to move faster," I told him. "Keith is trying to sell properties. The probate filing will stop that. Once the court processes the will, Keith will have 0 legal standing. But Brielle, you need to understand something. The moment that will becomes public, Keith will know he's been caught. He might do something desperate." "What should I do?" I asked. Mr. Hernandez pulled out another document. "Your grandmother left you a letter. She instructed me to give it to you if Keith ever tried to claim control of the business." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Grandma's familiar handwriting filled 3 pages. "My dearest Brielle," it began. "If you're reading this, then Keith has made his move, and I'm no longer there to protect you. I'm so sorry I won't be there to guide you through this. But I want you to know that everything you need to defeat him is already in place. You are stronger and smarter than you realize. I've been training you for this moment your entire life." The letter detailed Grandma's suspicions about Keith. She'd known within weeks of meeting him that he was a fraud. The private investigator's report had simply confirmed her instincts. "I couldn't tell your mother directly. She's been lonely for so long, and Keith made her feel special. She wouldn't have believed me without proof. And by the time I had proof, She was already emotionally invested in the relationship. Grandma's letter continued. I've protected the business in ways Keith doesn't understand. Every property deed includes a clause that requires my direct approval for any sale or transfer during your lifetime. That clause transfers to you upon my death. Keith cannot sell the hotels, even if he somehow gains power of attorney. The board of directors is loyal to you. I've spoken to each member personally about Keith. They know he's dangerous. When you're ready to take control, they'll support you completely. The financial records Carmen is keeping are crucial. They prove Keith has been embezzling from the company. That's a criminal offense. When the time is right, you can use that evidence to have him arrested. But most importantly, Brielle, remember this. You are a Montgomery. This business is your birthright. Keith is a con artist who prey on grieving families. Don't let him intimidate you. Stand your ground. Fight for what's yours. I love you more than anything in this world. You've always been my greatest pride and joy. Show Keith and everyone else what Montgomery women are made of. With all my love, Grandma. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Grandma had known this would happen. She'd prepared for it. She protected me even after death. What's my next move? I asked Mr. Hernandez. We file the will today. I'll request an emergency hearing given the evidence of fraud and embezzlement. The judge will likely freeze all assets pending investigation. That stops Keith cold. And then you take your rightful place as owner and CEO of Montgomery Hotels. The board meets, you present your grandmother's letter and the evidence of Keith's crimes, and you assume control. That afternoon, Mr. Hernandez filed the will with King County Probate Court. He also filed a motion for emergency asset protection, attaching the evidence of the embezzled funds and Keith's fraudulent legal documents. By evening, the judge had granted the motion. All Montgomery Hotels accounts were frozen. No one could access funds or make any business decisions without court approval. Keith found out within hours. He called me 23 times. I didn't answer. He showed up at my apartment at 9 p.m., pounding on the door. Brielle, I know you're in there. Open this door right now. I called the police and watched through the peephole as 2 officers arrived. Keith immediately switched to his charming persona. Officers, there's been a misunderstanding. I'm this young lady's stepfather. We need to discuss a family business matter. Sir, she's asked you to leave. That makes this trespassing. Keith's mask slipped. This is ridiculous. I'm trying to help her manage a complicated estate. She's making terrible decisions because she's emotional about her grandmother's death. One of the officers looked at me. Ma'am, do you want this man to have access to your property? No, I want him to leave and not contact me again. Keith's face turned red. You're making a huge mistake, Brielle. You're going to regret this. That business will collapse without proper management and it'll be your fault. The officers escorted him away. I watched from my window as he sat in his car for 30 minutes, talking angrily on his phone. Finally, he drove away. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. What have you done? Keith says you've frozen all the hotel accounts and filed some kind of legal action against him. This is cruel, Brielle. He's only tried to help. I didn't respond to Mom's text. Instead, I called Carmen. Can you arrange an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning? Tell the directors it's urgent. Consider it done. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Grandma's letter, her confidence in me, her preparations. She'd known Keith would try exactly what he was doing. She'd protected me from beyond the grave. The next morning, I arrived at the Florence at 8 a.m. All 7 board members were already gathered in the conference room. These were people Grandma had trusted, business leaders and hotel industry veterans who'd advised her for years. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm sure you've heard rumors about legal actions and frozen accounts. I want to explain what's happening. I told them everything. Keith's fraud, the fake legal documents, the embezzlement, the private investigators' report about his history. I showed them Grandma's letter. I presented the financial evidence of the stolen money. When I finished, the room was silent. Finally, the board chair, a woman named Patricia Vance who'd known Grandma for 30 years, spoke. Your grandmother warned us this might happen. She told each of us privately that if Keith ever tried to claim control, we should support you completely. Patricia continued, We've been waiting for you to make your move, Brielle. Some of us were concerned you might be too intimidated by Keith's manipulation. I'm proud to see you fighting back. Another board member, James Sullivan, nodded. Florence spent your entire life preparing you to run this company. We all saw it. We know you're ready. The question is, what do you need from us? I need you to officially recognize me as the owner and CEO of Montgomery Hotels. I need your support when Keith tries to challenge this, and I need your help managing the company while we deal with the legal fallout. You have it, Patricia said immediately. The vote was unanimous. I was officially CEO. Over the next week, everything happened quickly. The probate court processed Grandma's will. I officially inherited the entire Montgomery Hotels empire. The police opened an investigation into Keith's embezzlement. The fake legal documents he'd tried to make me sign became evidence in a fraud case. Keith hired an expensive attorney and tried to fight everything, claiming he'd been trying to help manage a complicated estate and that I was an ungrateful stepdaughter who didn't understand business. But the evidence was overwhelming. Harold provided forensic accounting records proving Keith had stolen over $200,000. Mr. Hernandez produced the fake legal documents. The private investigator's report showed Keith's pattern of defrauding wealthy women. The prosecutor charged him with embezzlement, fraud, and attempted theft. Mom finally started to see the truth. She came to my apartment 3 weeks after Keith's arrest, looking exhausted and heartbroken. I need to apologize, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I should have seen what he was. I should have protected you instead of defending him. I wanted to be angry with her, but seeing her devastated face, I mostly felt sad. He was a professional con artist, Mom. He made a career out of fooling people. Your grandmother tried to warn me. She said she had concerns about Keith's intentions. I accused her of being controlling and not wanting me to be happy. Mom started crying. I chose him over her. Over you. I'm so sorry, Brielle. We talked for hours that night. Mom explained how Keith had isolated her from friends and family, always with reasonable-sounding explanations. How he'd convinced her that Grandma was trying to control my inheritance unfairly. How he'd made her feel special and loved after years of loneliness. It was so convincing, Mom said. He showed me documents that looked official. He had explanations for everything. When you froze the accounts, he told me you were having a breakdown from grief, that you were making irrational decisions and he was trying to protect you. He's a professional liar, Mom. That's what he does. I'm filing for divorce, she said. My attorney says I can probably get an annulment since the marriage was based on fraud. Keith lied about his past, his finances, his intentions. Everything was a lie. Over the following months, the legal system ground forward. Keith pleaded not guilty to all charges, but the evidence was too strong. His attorney eventually negotiated a plea deal. Keith would plead guilty to embezzlement and fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence. He got 5 years in prison and was ordered to repay the stolen money. Mom's annulment was granted. She moved in with me temporarily while she rebuilt her life. It was awkward at first, but we slowly repaired our relationship. She started therapy to process how Keith had manipulated her. Your grandmother would be so proud of you, Mom told me one evening as we reviewed Montgomery Hotel's quarterly reports. She always said you were tougher than you looked. Running Montgomery Hotels was challenging but exhilarating. I'd spent years learning the business, but actually being in charge was different. I made mistakes and learned from them. The board supported me, offering guidance without trying to control my decisions. Patricia became an invaluable mentor, teaching me the political aspects of business management that Grandma hadn't had time to cover. 6 months after taking control, I expanded the business, acquiring 2 new properties in Portland. I promoted Carmen to regional manager, recognizing her loyalty and competence. Harold became my chief financial officer officially, and we implemented new security measures to prevent future embezzlement. The business thrived under my leadership. Revenue increased by 15% in the first year. Industry publications profiled me as a young entrepreneur to watch. The story of how I defeated Keith's fraud attempt became a cautionary tale about protecting family businesses from predators. Mom slowly rebuilt her confidence. She started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping other victims of financial abuse recognize warning signs. She became an advocate for elder fraud prevention, speaking at community centers about her experience. I'm trying to turn what happened into something positive, she explained. If my story helps even one person avoid a con artist like Keith, then maybe some good came from it. 1 year after Grandma's death, I stood in her office at the Florence, now officially my office. I'd kept most of her furniture and decorations, wanting to feel her presence. On the wall hung a portrait of Grandma at the hotel's grand opening 30 years earlier, young and confident and full of dreams. "I did it, Grandma," I said softly to the portrait. "I protected your legacy. I beat Keith. I'm running the business you built, and I'm making you proud." I could almost hear her voice responding, warm and encouraging. "I always knew you would, sweetheart. You're a Montgomery." The business continued to grow. We opened 2 more properties in the second year, expanding into California. I hired a team of talented managers, building a company culture that valued loyalty, integrity, and excellence. Montgomery Hotels became known not just for luxury accommodations, but for ethical business practices. We implemented industry-leading employee benefits, sustainability initiatives, and community partnerships. The success wasn't just about profits. It was about continuing Grandma's vision of hospitality that made people feel valued and cared for. Every decision I made, I asked myself what Grandma would do. Usually, the answer was clear. Keith was released from prison after serving 3 years. He immediately left the state, and I heard through legal channels that he'd moved to Arizona. Mom had moved forward with her life. She'd started dating someone new, a kind retired teacher she'd met through her volunteer work. This time, she was taking things slowly and had asked me to review her new boyfriend's background. "I know it seems paranoid," she admitted, "but after Keith, I need to be sure." "It's not paranoid, Mom. It's smart." Her new boyfriend, Thomas, turned out to be exactly who he claimed to be, a widower with grown children, modest retirement savings, and no history of fraud. He treated Mom with genuine respect and kindness. Slowly, she began to trust again. As for me, I was thriving in ways I'd never imagined. At 24, I was running a $55 million hotel empire. I'd been featured in business magazines, invited to speak at hospitality conferences, and approached by investors wanting to partner on expansion projects. But more than the success, I felt Grandma's presence guiding me. Every challenge I faced, I remembered her strength. Every decision I made, I channeled her wisdom. She'd prepared me for this in ways I was still discovering. 2 years after that confrontation with Keith, I hosted Montgomery Hotel's annual gala at the Florence. The event celebrated our newest property opening and raised money for hospitality industry scholarships. Mom attended with Thomas, both of them smiling and relaxed. Carmen was there with her family, proud of her promotion. The entire board attended, celebrating the company's continued success. As I gave the welcome speech, I looked around the room at the people who'd supported me through the hardest period of my life. People who'd believed in me when Keith tried to make everyone think I was too young and inexperienced to run a business. My grandmother, Florence Montgomery, built this company on the principle that hospitality is about making people feel valued, I said. She taught me that success isn't just about profits. It's about integrity, loyalty, and fighting for what's right even when it's difficult. I raised my glass. To Florence Montgomery, who taught me to be strong, and to everyone here who helped me protect her legacy, thank you. The room erupted in applause. After the speeches, I returned to the executive office and found an envelope on my desk. Inside was a note in Mr. Hernandez's handwriting. "Your grandmother left this with instructions to give it to you on the 2-year anniversary of taking control of the company." Inside was another letter from Grandma. "My dearest Brielle, if you're reading this, then you won. You fought Keith, protected the business, and proved yourself as a leader. I knew you would. You were always meant for this. I'm so proud of you. Not just for defeating a con artist, but for becoming the woman I always knew you'd be. Strong, smart, compassionate, and brave. Montgomery Hotels is yours now, truly and completely. Build it into something even greater than I imagined. And always remember, you are a Montgomery. That means something. It means integrity. It means strength. It means never giving up no matter how hard the fight. I love you forever, Grandma." I pressed the letter to my chest, tears streaming down my face. But they were happy tears, tears of gratitude and pride and love. Grandma had protected me even in death, and now I would protect her legacy forever. Montgomery Hotels wasn't just a business. It was family, history, and a promise kept. And I was exactly where I was meant to be.